They say the real action in Hollywood never happened on the set. It happened in back rooms, at poker tables, and on land no one wanted until a star bought it. For every hit film, there was a secret side hustle, a risky investment, or a fortune lost chasing the next big thing. Why did so many icons throw their money at wild dreams? And how did those gambles change Hollywood forever? Sometimes, the greatest scripts were written in bank ledgers, if you know where to look. Errol Flynn's Cuban gambling paradise. When most people think of Errol Flynn, they remember the wild-eyed, devil-may-care hero swinging from chandeliers or laughing in the face of danger on the silver screen. But in the late 1950s, at the height of his faded fame and deepening debt, Flynn set his sights on something far riskier than pirate movies, a real-life gamble that would entangle him in the hurricane of history. Cuba, then known as the playground of the Americas, was awash in American mob money, celebrity excess, and political intrigue. Havana's casinos and nightclubs were a magnet for the world's wealthy, and everyone wanted a piece of the action. Errol Flynn, always restless and forever chasing the next big score, saw an opportunity to reinvent himself, not just as a movie star, but as a business tycoon. With his charisma and a reputation for living on the edge, Flynn was approached by a group of well-heeled American investors who wanted to build a luxury resort and casino complex on one of Cuba's most pristine offshore islands. The pitch was irresistible: a private getaway where the world's rich and famous could drink, dance, and gamble in secrecy, far from the prying eyes of the mainland and nosy American journalists. Flynn himself was promised not just a stake in the venture, but a starring role as its public face, a golden opportunity to revive his fortunes. Flush with borrowed cash, the syndicate began pouring money into land development, casino equipment, and lavish plans. Flynn was everywhere, schmoozing with politicians, toasting the venture in Havana, and selling the vision of a Caribbean Monte Carlo to his circle of Hollywood friends. Stars, socialites, and businessmen all wanted in, sending cash south in hopes of future jackpots. But Flynn and his partners failed to see the storm brewing over Cuba. While they drew up blueprints and threw parties, Fidel Castro's revolution was gathering steam in the mountains. The rebels marched ever closer to Havana as Flynn's casino project neared completion. Some claim Flynn, never one to shy away from adventure, even met Castro himself, though whether as a curious tourist or secret investor remains the stuff of legend. Then, in January 1959, the revolution exploded. Batista's regime fell, casinos were shuttered, and American holdings were seized overnight. Flynn's paradise was now squarely in enemy hands, unfinished, abandoned, and worthless. Investors lost everything. Flynn, ever the survivor, shrugged it off in public, but in private, the loss cut deep. For the rest of his life, the dream of a Cuban empire haunted him, another cautionary tale from a star who could never resist one last roll of the dice. Howard Hughes's TWWA Takeover and the Spruce Goose. Howard Hughes was the kind of figure who made Hollywood look tame. Born into wealth, driven by genius and madness in equal measure, he straddled the worlds of aviation, engineering, and show business like a colossus. But behind the glamour of Hughes's high-profile romances and blockbuster productions lay a pattern of obsession with investments that could dwarf the fortunes and follies of entire studios. The story really takes off with Hughes's bid to dominate the skies through Trans World Airlines TWA. By the 1930s, airlines were the future, and Hughes, already flush from movie profits, and the Hughes Tool Company saw aviation as his new stage. He began quietly buying up TWA shares, eventually seizing control and plunging the company into an era of breakneck innovation. Hughes poured tens of millions into new planes, new routes, and new technologies, vowing to make TWA the jewel of global air travel. Under his guidance, TWA acquired the sleek Lockheed Constellation, a plane so advanced It seemed to fly straight out of a science fiction movie. But Hughes's appetite for the spectacular didn't end there. In the shadow of World War II, he conceived the H-4 Hercules, better known as the Spruce Goose, a flying boat of almost mythical size, designed to haul men and material across oceans. The government funded the project as a potential solution to U-boat blockades. But as the war ended, the need for such a behemoth evaporated. Hughes, unwilling to let go, poured millions of his own money into completing the prototype, determined to prove the doubters wrong. What followed became legend. In 1947, before a skeptical press corps, Hughes personally piloted the Spruce Goose on its one and only flight. A brief hop above Long Beach Harbor that made headlines but convinced no one. The colossal plane was quietly mothballed, a hangar-sized monument to both ambition and extravagance. Shareholders and business partners grew anxious as Hughes's obsessive secrecy and erratic spending began to endanger TWA itself. Boardroom battles turned ugly. For years, Hughes used legal maneuvers and personal funds to retain control, refusing to let his airline slip away even as the company's debts mounted. By the early 1960s, after lawsuits and regulatory scrutiny, Hughes finally lost his grip on TWA. He walked away, battered, his personal fortune diminished, but his reputation as Hollywood's wildest and most uncontainable investor was forever secured. Hughes' legacy remains a cautionary tale about the thin line between brilliance and recklessness, a reminder that in Hollywood, even the most extravagant dreams can become costly nightmares. The Beverly Hills Hotel oil scandal. To outsiders, the Beverly Hills Hotel was, and remains, the ultimate symbol of Hollywood glamour. It's where stars checked in to escape scandal, where moguls made million-dollar deals over martinis, and where the world's press waited by the iconic green and pink entrance for a glimpse of screen royalty. But in the late 1940s, the hotel's lush lawns and tennis courts became the epicenter of one of the most audacious investment schemes classic Hollywood ever saw, a plot that promised black gold beneath the bougainvillea. It began with whispers among the city's elite. There were rumors that rich oil deposits, just like those that had made Los Angeles boom decades earlier, might be hidden under the hotel and its exclusive neighborhood. A fast-talking crew of geologists and promoters began circulating through Beverly Hills, pitching stars and studio heads alike on a can't-miss proposition. For a generous buy-in, investors could claim a share in a new oil drilling company with rights to dig right under the Beverly Hills Hotel and adjacent properties. The pitch was irresistible. Oil had already transformed parts of Los Angeles into instant millionaires. And who wouldn't want to strike it rich while sipping champagne poolside? Before long, the scheme had snared a who's who of Golden Age Hollywood. Actors, agents, producers, and even a few directors signed over checks. The more exclusive the list, the higher the pressure to get in before the wells gushed. But the real riches weren't in the ground. They were in the pockets of the schemers. As money poured in, the con artists put on a show of exploratory drilling, complete with rented equipment, staged site visits, and fabricated geological surveys. Any evidence of oil was just enough to keep hope, and new investments flowing. The truth unraveled slowly, as repeated drilling yielded nothing but dirt and disappointment. Suspicion turned to outrage when some investors finally demanded to see the books. The promoters vanished almost overnight, their scam exposed just as police and lawyers closed in. Stars who had been promised fortunes lost their investments, and the hotel's owners scrambled to save their reputations. In the aftermath, the Beverly Hills Hotel oil scandal became a cautionary Hollywood legend, a reminder that, in a town built on illusion, even the rich and famous could fall for a script that was too good to be true. And for a brief, bizarre moment, the glitz of old Hollywood collided with the grit of the oil fields, leaving only rumors and regret bubbling up beneath the palm trees. Clara Belle's husband and the racetrack fiasco. Clara Belle, the original it girl of Hollywood, was no stranger to the spotlight or scandal. But even she couldn't have predicted the disaster that would unfold when her husband, Rex Belle, a charming cowboy actor and later a Nevada politician, dragged Hollywood's elite into a racetrack investment scheme that seemed glamorous on paper, but ended in heartbreak, lawsuits, and broken fortunes. Rex Belle was never content with just being a movie star's husband or playing second fiddle in Clara's tabloid-drenched life. He was restless, always looking for the next big thing, the deal that would make him a legend in his own right. The racetrack business, he thought, was his ticket out of her shadow and into the world of moguls. At the time, Southern California was experiencing a horse racing boom. Santa Anita Park was pulling in massive crowds, and big money was changing hands faster than the horses could run. Belle started talking up a bold new plan. He would help build and manage a luxury racetrack just outside Hollywood, a playground for celebrities and socialites where fortunes could be won in a single afternoon. He pitched the idea at cocktail parties and club gatherings, convincing some of the era's most bankable names to invest. With Clara Belle's name lending the project an air of legitimacy, stars like Gary Cooper, Carole Lombard, and even a few major studio heads bought in, seduced by the promise of endless glamour and easy profits. For a while, it looked like Belle might actually pull it off. The plans were grand, the designs were lush, and the Hollywood press buzzed with excitement. Money flowed in, and land was purchased on the outskirts of Los Angeles. But as costs ballooned and delays mounted, cracks began to show. Key permits were delayed, and management was mired in infighting. To keep the project afloat, Belle and his partners started borrowing from incoming investor funds to cover mounting expenses, a financial house of cards that only stood as long as the hype continued. When the track finally opened, attendance was disappointing, and the operation quickly hemorrhaged money. The promised luxury experience was marred by shoddy construction, management scandals, and a string of bad publicity. Investors began to suspect they'd been sold a fantasy, and the lawsuits came rolling in. Clara Belle herself, who had initially vouched for the scheme, was devastated as her name was dragged through the mud by association. The racetrack fiasco became a warning to Hollywood's power players. Not every script leads to a happy ending. In the aftermath, fortunes were lost, friendships soured, and Clara and Rex's marriage suffered. What was supposed to be a glittering monument to success became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the brightest lights can cast the longest shadows, especially when money and trust are on the line. Charlie Chaplan and United Artists' European bank disaster. Charlie Chaplan, perhaps the most recognizable face in the world during the silent film era, was never content to just play the fool on screen. Off-screen, he was a shrewd, ambitious businessman, one of the founding members of United Artists, the revolutionary studio created so stars could control their own destinies and profits. But even Chaplan, with all his savvy and skepticism, wasn't immune to the perils of international investment schemes that seemed too good to be true. By the late 1930s, United Artists was sitting on enormous profits from Chaplan, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and other legends. The world, however, was on the edge of war, and everyone was looking for safe havens for their money. Chaplan and his partners began moving large sums of studio money to Swiss and other European banks, lured by promises of tax-free growth, rock-solid privacy, and lucrative interest rates. The strategy seemed sensible. Europe's financial centers were legendary for protecting the wealth of the world's elite, and Swiss banking secrecy was almost mythic. Advisors and so-called financial experts swooped in, promising United Artists a variety of offshore instruments and special accounts. The studio poured millions into these foreign banks, convinced they were outsmarting both the IRS and any future American political turmoil. Chaplan himself, always worried about government seizing his assets, personally advocated for keeping a substantial portion of his fortune abroad. But reality soon intervened. The outbreak of World War II threw European financial markets into chaos, Banks were shuttered, governments froze foreign accounts, and once reliable contacts vanished overnight. United Artists executives scrambled to secure their funds, but they quickly discovered that large chunks had simply evaporated, lost to bank failures, government seizures, or outright fraud. In some cases, the banks had invested recklessly or had never really safeguarded the money at all. For Chaplan and United Artists, the losses were staggering. Legal battles dragged on for years, but most of the money was never recovered. The scandal was kept mostly quiet. No one wanted the public to know that the world's most powerful film studio had been outfoxed by foreign bankers and a web of shady intermediaries. Chaplan himself would later reflect, with trademark dark humor, that it was easier to make millions in Hollywood than keep them safe in Europe. The United Artists banking disaster became a hidden lesson for Hollywood's elite. No matter how clever or successful you are at home, there's always someone waiting to separate you from your money on the international stage. For Chaplan, the episode was a bitter reminder that even the masters of illusion can fall for a financial trick, and that the world beyond Hollywood is full of plots and twists stranger than any movie. Mae West's Muscle Beach Gym Empire. Mae West was never one to follow the rules. With her sultry wit and unapologetic confidence, she broke taboos, outwitted censors, and became one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood. But in the post-war era, as her movie roles slowed and America's obsession with health and fitness soared, West saw a new frontier for fame and fortune, one that would draw in stars, bodybuilders, and big dreamers alike. This wasn't just another Hollywood fad. It was Mae West's bid to build a gym empire, and a cautionary tale about mixing showbiz sparkle with business brawn. The plan seemed perfect for the times. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, the physical culture craze was everywhere. Muscle Beach in Santa Monica was drawing crowds to watch sun-kissed athletes and aspiring Adonises flex their stuff. Mae West, always ahead of the curve, decided to invest heavily in a chain of gyms and health farms up and down the California coast, envisioning a glamorous network of fitness palaces for celebrities and regular folks alike. She put her name and money behind a new brand of gyms that promised not just exercise, but an experience worthy of Hollywood royalty. With her signature flair, West hosted lavish opening parties, inviting fellow stars and the press to marvel at the state-of-the-art facilities. Advertisements splashed her name and face across billboards. "Come up and lift with Mae West," a playful twist on her famous catchphrase. For a brief moment, it looked like she might pull it off. Membership soared, and some of the city's most famous bodies made regular appearances, lending the venture an aura of cool credibility. But the fitness business proved trickier than a movie set. The costs of maintaining glamorous facilities skyrocketed, and the logistics of running multiple locations became overwhelming. Lawsuits began to pile up over unpaid vendors, breach of contract, and allegations that some trainers and staff weren't paid for months. Worse, some gym-goers complained that the gyms didn't deliver on the Hollywood promises, citing broken equipment and overcrowded classes. Mae's business partners, some of whom were less experienced than they let on, struggled to keep up with the financial realities. By the mid-1950s, the Muscle Beach gym empire began to crumble. Several locations closed abruptly, leaving members locked out and creditors scrambling for answers. Mae West, whose reputation for toughness had seen her through Hollywood's toughest storms, found herself facing lawsuits and headlines questioning her business savvy. The once glamorous venture became a cautionary tale about chasing trends without a solid foundation. In the end, Mae West's Muscle Beach empire faded as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind only memories, a few faded photos, and the lesson that not every Hollywood star can flex their way to business success. W.C. Fields and the Orange Grove Bubble. W.C. Fields was the master of comic cynicism, a man whose screen persona was equal parts charm, wit, and wary distrust of the world. Off camera, Fields wasn't much different. He liked a good drink, distrusted bankers, and believed there was no safer investment than a patch of California dirt. In the 1930s, that faith would be sorely tested as Fields, and a gaggle of Hollywood friends, became enmeshed in one of the era's strangest and most disastrous investment bubbles, the California orange grove craze. The logic seemed sound. California's citrus industry was booming, fueled by national demand and the promise of easy profits. Orange groves were marketed to Hollywood's elite as the surest thing in agriculture. Real estate agents and agricultural promoters fanned out across Los Angeles, inviting stars and producers to exclusive parties on sun-drenched farmland. The sales pitch was irresistible. Buy a few acres, let migrant workers tend the trees, and watch your fortune grow, literally. Fields, never one to turn down an easy dollar, went all in. He bought several parcels at what he was told of were bargain prices, and soon convinced a handful of friends, silent film stars, screenwriters, even a couple of producers, to join him. The idea of swapping the chaos of movie sets for the tranquility of an orange orchard appealed to many in the business. Stars bragged about their new gentleman farmer status at Hollywood dinner parties, and more investors lined up, eager for a slice of the action. But beneath the surface, all was not well. Shady land agents had been inflating the value of worthless or blighted acreage, using forged appraisals and fake crop yield reports. The plots Fields and his friends bought were often on marginal land with poor water access, making them all but useless for citrus production. To make matters worse, a sudden blight swept through Southern California, devastating crops and sending orange prices plummeting. Within just a few years, the Great Orange Grove scheme unraveled. Fields watched in horror as his foolproof investment turned sour. He lost thousands, and others lost even more. The gentleman farmers were left with barren land and empty pockets, forced to admit they'd been outsmarted by smooth-talking con men and the unpredictable forces of nature. The Orange Grove bubble became a running joke in Hollywood, another example of how even the sharpest minds could be lured by dreams of easy money. For W.C. Fields, it was a bitter lesson. Sometimes, the safest bet is to stick with what you know, and never trust a deal that sounds too sweet. John Wayne's Alamo Village Money Pit. John Wayne, Duke to his friends and millions of moviegoers, was the ultimate symbol of American grit, rugged independence, and unwavering patriotism. So it was little surprise that when he set out to make his dream project, the Alamo, he refused to cut corners. But Wayne's commitment to authenticity turned what was supposed to be a movie set into one of Hollywood's most notorious investment sinkholes, a saga that would leave the Duke and his investors reeling for decades. Wayne had wanted to make a film about the legendary 1836 siege at the Alamo for years. When no studio would finance his sweeping vision, he did what Hollywood's biggest stars often do. He bankrolled the project himself, assembling a roster of industry friends and loyal fans as financial backers. Determined to recreate history on an epic scale, Wayne purchased a vast tract of land in Bracketville, Texas, and set about building a full-scale replica of the Alamo mission, along with an entire working town, complete with streets, shops, and even a functioning church. The construction costs ballooned. Wayne insisted on historical accuracy for every brick and beam, overruling studio accountants and doubling down with more personal funds. As the project dragged on, weather delays and logistical nightmares only added to the expenses. Investors, some of them fellow actors, others wealthy fans lured by Wayne's charisma, kept writing checks, convinced that when The Alamo finally hit theaters, it would be a blockbuster that paid them back tenfold. When the film was released in 1960, it was indeed a spectacle, earning Oscar nominations and drawing curious crowds. But despite its size, The Alamo struggled to recoup its massive budget. The costs of maintaining Alamo Village, the sprawling set-turned-tourist attraction, continued to pile up. Visitors trickled in, but ticket sales and film rentals never matched the site's upkeep or the film's towering expenses. For decades, Alamo Village stood as a monument to both Wayne's vision and Hollywood's capacity for excess. The property changed hands multiple times, sometimes serving as a Western tourist destination, other times left abandoned to the harsh Texas sun. Wayne himself never fully recouped his investment and was candid about the toll it took on his finances and friendships. In the end, the Alamo was less a triumph of American filmmaking than a warning to every star with a pet project and a blank check. John Wayne's Money Pit stands as a testament to how even legends can be undone by ambition, and how a single movie can haunt a career far longer than any six-shooter duel ever could. Jean Harlow's Mother and the Miracle Face Cream Stock. Jean Harlow, the original platinum blonde bombshell, captivated millions with her wit, beauty, and presence. But behind the scenes, it was her ambitious and often overbearing mother who became the center of one of Hollywood's strangest investment fiascos, a so-called miracle face cream that promised eternal youth and delivered only lawsuits, disappointment, and a trail of broken bank accounts. Known as Mother Jean, Harlow's mother was a constant force in her daughter's life and career, acting as manager, publicist, and gatekeeper. In the mid-1930s, Mother Jean grew enamored with a local entrepreneur who claimed to have developed a revolutionary new cosmetic, a cream that could erase wrinkles, fade age spots, and keep the faces of Hollywood's elite glowing under studio lights. The pitch was irresistible, especially in an industry obsessed with youth. With Jean Harlow's name attached, Mother Jean went to work, convincing actors, directors, and even makeup artists to invest in the company manufacturing the so-called miracle cream. Some signed on as financial backers, while others agreed to hawk the product to friends and fans. Rumors swirled that the secret formula had been developed by European scientists and smuggled into the U.S. as the next great breakthrough in beauty. As the initial batches of cream rolled out, stars lined up to be photographed with the jars, and Hollywood's gossip columns gushed about the product's unbelievable effects. But it didn't take long for cracks to appear. Customers complained that the cream was little more than glorified cold cream. No miracles, just the same old moisturizer. Some even reported breakouts and rashes. Refunds were demanded. The press, once charmed by the Hollywood angle, began digging into the company's background and discovered that the so-called European scientists didn't exist, and the miracle claims were pure fantasy. Angry investors filed lawsuits, and the enterprise quickly collapsed under the weight of scandal and bad publicity. Mother Jean's reputation, and, by extension, Jean Harlow's, took a beating in the press. Hollywood's elite were left red-faced, not from the face cream, but from the embarrassment of being duped. The miracle face cream fiasco remains a cautionary tale in Hollywood history. No matter how bright the lights, there's always a shadow of opportunism and greed, and not every investment is worth betting your name or your face on. Warner Bros.' Hollywoodland real estate gamble. In the roaring 1920s, Hollywood's fortunes seemed limitless. The studios were booming, sound was transforming cinema, and fortunes were made overnight. The Warner Brothers, Harry, Albert, Sam, and Jack, were kings of the new industry, riding high after the success of The Jazz Singer. But flush with cash and optimism, they set their sights beyond the silver screen, investing in a sprawling real estate scheme that would help create and almost destroy the most iconic sign in movie history, Hollywoodland. The plan was as grand as any blockbuster: buy up acres of undeveloped hillside land above Los Angeles and transform it into an exclusive housing development, complete with luxurious homes, winding roads, and the promise of movie star neighbors. To lure buyers, the developers erected a giant sign on the hill, Hollywoodland, each towering letter illuminated by thousands of bulbs, beckoning new money and fresh dreams westward. The Warner Brothers and other studio executives poured money into the project, seeing it as a surefire investment that would keep their fortunes safe from the volatility of the film business. The marketing was relentless, promising panoramic views, glamorous parties, and proximity to the hottest stars in town. Early sales were brisk, as the booming economy encouraged speculation and risk-taking. But as the Great Depression hit in 1929, the dream quickly soured. Home sales stalled, construction halted, and many buyers defaulted on their lots. The Warner brothers, who had banked on continued prosperity, watched their investments shrivel as the market crashed. For a time, even the future of their studio was in question, as debts from the Hollywoodland scheme piled up. The infamous sign itself fell into disrepair, letters broke, bulbs went out, and it became a monument to the broken promises of Hollywood's land rush. It wasn't until decades later that the city refurbished the sign, shortening it to simply Hollywood and turning it into the iconic symbol we know today. The Warner Bros.' Hollywoodland gamble is a classic example of how even the most powerful players in Hollywood can be blindsided by the unpredictability of the real world. For a few short years, the sign stood as a beacon for dreamers. For many, it also stood as a stark warning. Even in Tinseltown, there's no such thing as a guaranteed hit. From doomed racetracks to vanished fortunes in oil and oranges, Hollywood's wildest investment schemes show just how risky life could be behind the glamour. Even the biggest stars weren't immune to dreams that went bust. In a town fueled by ambition and illusion, chasing the next big thing was always part of the game. Sometimes the boldest bets happened far from the cameras, and the wildest stories of all were written not in scripts, but in the risks stars dared to take.